Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. So, today we're going to be getting into the whole story behind The Room and the mysterious and eccentric man who was behind it, Tommy Wiseau. So, we're going to get into his backstory and the backstory of what quite possibly is the greatest, worst movie of all time. So, I hope you'll enjoy this journey we're going to take on into the mysterious, mystical, and unusual territory that is the life of Tommy Wiseau and the movie that he made and is most known for, The Room, which, as I've said in promoting this live, is, like I say, that the greatest, worst movie of all time. He made the film intending it to be a serious drama, but due to the bad acting, the poor script, it unintentionally became a comedy. He claims he always intended it to be perceived as a comedy, but this has been heavily disputed by people he knows. And you'll notice I used a bit of a snippet of Caribbean Blue as the intro. I'm not entirely sure why. I could have used a song that was used for the soundtrack of The Room. It probably would have been more appropriate. But I don't know. I just felt it was appropriate for this live for whatever reason, and I go by my instincts. Hi, Diva Girl. Glad you could make it. Yeah. Have you ever heard of The Room, Diva Girl, or is this your first time hearing about what is, as I say, the greatest, worst movie of all time, and possibly the most insane story behind how it was made, the whole process of it all, and you think of eccentric people in Hollywood. Tommy Wiseau takes eccentricity to a whole different level. He won't even publicly confirm when and where he was born. It took years for people to figure out exactly what his actual name is. So he was born Tomasz Wykorkiewicz in Poznan, Poland on October the 3rd, 1955. And he fled communist Poland in his youth. And he and his cousin fled Poland. They bribed the right people. Then they got on a bus to France, which was they settled in a kind of border town on the outskirts of France, where Tommy and his cousin gained work as dishwashers, and also Tommy started street peddling, something that he'd actually done whilst he was living in Poland under communist rule. Even when back in living in Poland, Tommy was an outsider. He was always an outsider. He was known as, the American, they used to call him, because Tommy, whilst living in Poland under communism, had an obsession with American entertainment, American movies, Disney animations, things like that. So Tommy was very much into that, and he would sell movie posters of American movies to people in Poland. And was often called a traitor and was beaten up for that. So he was an outcast there, and then went to France hoping for a new life, and did very well for himself in his street peddling and his dishwashing work. However, the hostel that he and his cousin were staying in were was raided by the police for drugs, and Tommy was said he was beaten up very badly during this altercation, and it was as a result of this altercation that Tommy decided to leave France and settle in America. Now, it's possible that he did have legal status in France. It's possible that he may have been considered a refugee, political refugee from communist Poland. But it's unknown as to whether he actually was a legal resident or migrant or asylum seeker in France or not. But what is known is that his presence in the United States is 100% legal, because his immigration records were found by Greg, who was the co-star of The Room with him, and his best friend, and we'll get into more about Greg very, very soon. But yeah, this shows you how mysterious Wiseau is, that he's very determined not to say his date of birth, where he was born, what his actual birth name is. It's had to have been pried out of him over years, and looked into by various different people, because he is that mysterious. Who is this man who self-financed this film? Where did all of his money come from? Where did he come from? It was all a mystery for a very, very long time, up until the last, decade or so. And so he moved to Louisiana. Not Louisiana. He moved to Louisiana, to Chalmette in Louisiana, where his aunt and uncle were living. And it's believed he may have gotten into the United States legally by some kind of Red Cross visa. And Tommy was also very well connected to the Catholic Church. He's a devout Catholic, and was a devout Catholic when he was in Poland. And it's possible that someone through the church may have vouched for him to come to America. But it's also possible that him coming from Poland, the American authorities accepted him as a refugee fleeing a communist country. But what is certain is his presence in America is legal. And he started using the surname Wiseau, which isn't his real surname. His real surname, as we said earlier, is a Polish surname, Wikokowicz, which I'm probably butchering, but forgive me, I'm not a Polish speaker. So the fact that I even got the fact that the W in Polish is pronounced with a V is pretty good. And I only know that because I knew a Polish girl whose name was Victoria, but it was spelt with a V. But yeah, not spelt with a V. It was spelt with a W, but she pronounced it Victoria. But it was spelt with the W. So yeah, that's how I knew. So yeah, he started with the surname Wiseau based on the nickname Wiseau, meaning bird in French, which is what he got, the nickname he got when he was living in France, because he used to sell bird trinkets, and he kind of stuck with it when he moved to Chalmette, because Chalmette is a Cajun country. So he changed his surname to be more French sounding, even though Wiseau isn't a French surname. It's not anybody's surname. It's just Tommy's adaptation of his own surname to francify it a bit so he could fit in, which isn't uncommon for immigrants, especially from non-English speaking countries, to do. Well, in Wiseau's case, he francified it because he was in a French cultural speaking area in Cajun country, Acadia. And he didn't last very long in Chalmette because he crashed his aunt's car, which pissed off his uncle, which was his birth relative, pretty significantly. And also, whilst working in their store, Tommy was often mocked for his accent by the local Cajun men, and Tommy didn't like that. And then one day, a man who Tommy had befriended, an older man, suggested to him that he move to San Francisco because the man said people would get you there. Which it's pretty understanding why he may have said that, because San Francisco, especially where Tommy settled around Fisherman's Wharf, is known for its eccentric characters. The guy who dresses up as Elmo and yells like crazy anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim things on the wharf, and it used to do it in New York, is now settled in the wharf. So that guy went viral. So yeah, that area has a history of peddlers and of eccentric and somewhat crazy types of people hanging around the streets. So compared to that, Tommy Wiseau wouldn't be as odd as he would be in Chalmette or in rural France or in Poznan, Poland. You know what I mean? So the guy, that was pretty good advice that Tommy got. So in the early 1980s, Tommy left Chalmette and moved to San Francisco on his own. And this was the first time in Tommy's life that he hadn't been living with or very close to any of his family. So first time in his life. So early 1980s, was born in 1955. He's in his mid-20s at this point. First time, on his own in a new city, and he did very well for himself in the early days. He started, as he often did, as a street peddler, which he'd done everywhere he'd lived in his adult and childhood life to earn extra money, and he'd sell things on Fisherman's Wharf, so like souvenirs, yo-yos, things like that, just like stuff for tourists, stuff for visitors, kids on their day out, all that kind of shit you find cheap stuff, which he'd buy in bulk and sell for a profit. And he made quite a good living doing this. And he also, to supplement that, would work odd jobs such as construction working, which would actually also come into play later whilst he was making the room, where he actually stiffed the set designer on the budget for nails, because he said she was overcharging him for the nails, and he said, "I work in construction," and I will often do my impression of his accent, so you know what he sounds like. He talks like this. He said, I worked in construction. I know how much nails cost." So he talks like that with a really heavy Eastern European accent. So and that's part of his eccentricities, and he would do this, and he would do the construction jobs also. But during this time, this is around the mid to late 80s. I think mid 80s when this happened. He was in a car crash, which was actually not Tommy's fault at all, and it was even near fatal. He was in hospital for a while and nearly died. And it's believed that as a result of this crash, Tommy won a very hefty civil suit settlement in court, and this is where Tommy got the money, the income that initially led to him being able to fund the room. So he gets this settlement. He's living in Fisherman's Wharf, or around Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then with this money, Tommy invests in a storefront on Fisherman's Wharf, and he names it Street Fashion USA, which is where he sells discounted Levi's jeans which he buys at a discount for markup to tourists. Basically, a lot of these Levi's were like defective or somewhat broken, ripped. Were wrecked in some way in transit, or in the production was faulty, whatever. So he bought them wholesale from somewhere at a heavily reduced rate, and would to a somewhat appreciative and respectable degree, would improve them from their condition, so stitch them up a bit, fix the zippers, what have you, to make them presentable, and then would sell them at a considerable markup to mainly tourists, mainly Asian tourists, that would frequent the Fisherman's Wharf area. And that was obviously a very good way to invest his money. He was a peddler. He just, took his peddling to a storefront and upped it significantly with the money he made from the civil suit that he launched after the car crash. And then also he would export leather jackets to Taiwan for a high markup as well. And as well as this, he was multifaceted in his investments. He invested in several apartment complexes that, by all the accounts, he still owns to this day. So real estate in the San Francisco Bay Area, massive amount of money to be made in that. It's a place that people from all over the world, never mind all over America, want to move and live. It's got the reputation of the hippie movement and the 60s, as well as all the history attached to San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz nearby. So all the people of various types of interests throughout the world will have a desire to want to live around there. So him investing in not just apartment buildings but entire blocks was a very shrewd investment. So people can call him crazy, but when it comes to finances, when it comes to investments apart from in entertainment and movies, in terms of making money, Tommy is very astute, and that's clear. The bulk of that money for the 6 million, I think he turned a lot significant profits from his street fashion store, and from his exporting of the leather jackets, and from the rent that he collected as a landlord of these several apartment complexes that he owned or had a significant stake in. So yeah, he really was raking in the dough. Hi, it's just Irish. Glad you're listening and glad you're here. And Diva, if you're still listening, and anyone else who's listening, just feel free to share your thoughts. I know this is probably a new subject to a lot of you. So to assist in this, I will link the film in my community page, which I believe is still on the Internet Archive. So you can watch it for free if you want, or you can go and pay for it with Tommy Wiseau at his website, and I'll leave that link as well in case you want to give him some money, which you don't really need to, but it would be nice for him, to show appreciation for artists and stuff, because he did put a lot of work and money into this. Although it is not a good film. It's fun to watch, but unintentionally fun, unintentionally funny, unintentionally comedic with how bizarre it all is. So it's a real experience. And Tommy started acting classes as well as running his street fashion store, exporting his leather jackets, and in his, being a landlord or a part owner of several apartment complexes, collecting rent or portions of rent from that. He also started acting classes in the early to mid 90s. And this is actually where, at an acting class, he met his future room co-star, Greg Sestero, at one that was being taught by Jean Shelton, and she was a very famous acting coach in LA. No, not in LA, in San Francisco. Sorry, which in 1998, where Greg Sestero was actually 19 years old, and Tommy was actually 43. So major difference in age. And Sestero says in his book, The Disaster Artist, which I will link as well for anyone who's interested in this. It's a great book. It's also available on Audible for audiobooks if you prefer that, which I do. I'm always up doing things. I'm always moving around even when I'm doing the live. That's why I don't have the camera on, you know what I mean? I'm always up and around doing something, feeding the cats whilst I do multitasking. It's just who I am. So, that makes sense if you want to listen to the audiobook. I prefer the audiobook, but you should certainly listen to the audiobook, The Disaster Artist, by Greg Sestero, who was Tommy's co-star and was the closest person I think anyone's ever been to him, which is saying a lot. So yeah, Greg was 19, Tommy was 43 at this acting class, and Sestero says he feels Wiseau is more comfortable around younger people, and also lies about his age to appear younger, because Tommy is something of a man-child and is very in touch with his youth, and portraying a sense of youthfulness, and seems intimidated by people his own age, and it also may appear that he's able to kind of wow and impress younger people as opposed to older people who may view his endless optimism and self-belief as delusional, whereas younger people will be more attracted and enchanted by it. So I think that has a lot to do with it, how he markets himself, because you got to remember Tommy Wiseau is a businessman, and he was a peddler. He knows how to market himself. He knows how to sell himself. So you've got to think that everything he does, there's a high level of calculation behind it. But the movie, he did intend it to be serious as a drama, but it was perceived, due to his own deluded self-belief and no one really having the balls to tell him this is shit or wanting to. It allowed the movie to become an utter disaster. The script was awful. The plot doesn't make any sense. The characters' personalities are very dimensional, yet often contradictory, and his character is bizarrely eccentric without any real reason or explanation. Most of the characters' actions in the movie are barely explained. So, like, it's been described, the movie The Room, accurately. I've described it as this, and others have as well, including Greg, which I'm happy to hear he agrees with me on this. That it's almost like an alien came to Earth for a week, watched sitcoms or soaps, and then said, right, I'm going to make a movie based on human behavior. That's how bizarre it is and alien like it is, and we'll get into that. But initially, Sestero was, really impressed and taken aback by Tommy's confidence in his performance style in the acting class that was, being done in 1998 by Gene Shelton in San Francisco. And Sestero felt that he himself lacked that confidence and that conviction in his own performance, and would oftentimes feel inhibited by his own inhibitions, you know, meaning his performances were less than what he felt he could truly give. Whereas with Wiseau, with Tommy was fearless, and Greg, although realizing that Tommy wasn't particularly talented in his abilities, he recognized that confidence and fearlessness and wanted some of it of himself. So approached Tommy after seeing Tommy in the class do an impression of Marlon Brando from A Streetcar Named Desire, where he goes, Stella, Stella, and just doing it in his accent. Instead of doing the dialogue, just yells Stella, Stella in his accent, and throws a chair and just acts like a total maniac, a berserker. And the class are just stunned, including Greg and the teacher. And Greg is just like, oh my God, I have to rehearse with this guy. I have to get to know this guy. I have to get some of this guy's fearlessness, because I know I can, you know, do it better than him, you know, which is accurate. And so, you know, Greg, after the class, approaches Tommy and goes, Tommy, I'd love to, you know, rehearse with you outside of class and then do something with the class next week. So then Tommy's like, why you wanna rehearse with me? And then Greg's like, oh, because of your fearlessness, Tommy. I want some of that. You know, I don't have what you have. And then Tommy goes, okay. And then they go out and they go to a restaurant together, a diner, a packed diner, crowded diner. And then Tommy starts reciting Shakespeare with Greg, and then pressures Greg to recite Shakespeare aloud, really loud, in front of all the people in the diner. This ultimately, you know, brings Greg out of his shell and enables him The Room is a cult classic film written, directed, and starring Tommy Wiseau, known as one of the worst movies ever made, despite being intended as a serious drama. It follows a San Francisco, it follows a San Francisco banker named Johnny, whose fiance. However, he never says fiance in the movie. It's always written and delivered as my future wife or your future wife. And the reason behind that is, we talked earlier about Tommy being beaten up badly by police officers in France during that raid on the hostel that he was staying at. And as a result of that, he didn't want any French in the film and didn't want to be reminded of France, which is probably why, you know, to repress the trauma he went through in Poland and France. He just insisted, oh, I come from New Orleans, you know, and he said to Greg, he said, oh, I come from New Orleans. I was born and raised in New Orleans, you know, and like, obviously he wasn't because of his accent, but Greg didn't push too much. But, you know, after that initial rehearsal they did together in the crowded diner, Greg became like really interested in Tommy, just because of how bizarre he was and how like different he was to anyone he'd ever known, and just realized that like Tommy had a capacity to get things done and make things happen, even if they were unorthodox. And Greg realized that by latching himself onto Tommy, opportunities could follow. And he was right. And maybe not in the way that he imagined, but they did. They certainly did follow. And despite Sestero having, you know, little self-belief in himself before Tommy came into his life, it was actually Greg who was able to get professional representation and agents before Tommy even was. And basically, thank you, Just Iris, for the synopsis. That's completely accurate. And I'm glad that you've done a little research into it as well, and let the chat know and everybody know. Sorry, I had to Google it. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, it's something else. And the picture of it, it's the picture I have on screen. That's the movie poster, and that's the guy we're talking about, Tommy Wiseau. He's got this long dyed black hair. He's got this face where he looks almost like Frankenstein or Quasimodo. You know what I mean? Like, these are the types of characters that his acting teacher was like, you should play villains or misunderstood monsters and things like that. This is for you. But Tommy was like, no, I'm not monster. I'm not bad guy. I, I hero. I leading man. I everyman. I American dream. And this obviously reflects in the plot of the movie of The Room, which, as I said earlier, it isn't really the American dream. It's like the perception that an alien or a foreigner from a non-English speaking country would perceive America to be. Now, I am an immigrant to America, but my perception of America was never as skewed as Tommy's was because I grew up in England and spent, significant time watching American media and watching American news and had access to American news. Wiseau didn't. So his perception of it was shaped entirely by fantasy, by the movies, especially by movies made in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s, which were, well, mainly movies made in the 50s and the 60s, which were especially an idealized vision of American life. And the realities of which were never, that hidden from me, whereas with him they were, because he grew up in a communist country. He grew up in communist occupied Poland, so heavy censorship, so he didn't get news from America. He got the movies that they were allowed to see or that were smuggled in that he managed to see through bootlegs. So yeah, the movie, it's like a foreigner's view of what someone would want the American dream to be, you know what I mean? And a very distorted view at that, But as I said, Sestero, The Room is a crazy good film. God, one of the best deconstructions of cinema ever made. I honestly think, welcome Mr. Electric as well. I completely defend the term, it's so good, it's bad. Because how many movies do you watch that are just bad that you never want to watch again? Like, I know many, many movies that I've seen that are just shit. Like Jack and Jill by Adam Sandler. I watched that movie once. I thought, this is absolutely bloody awful. I'm never watching this film again. There was nothing in it that it was so bad it was good. It was just terrible. Whereas with The Room, I've watched The Room more times than any other movie. So it has to be good on some level, which it is. It is good on some level because it provides me with entertainment. It doesn't serve its intended purpose as Wiseau wanted, but that's not what art's about. Art is open for interpretation, like my music, for example. I the main reason I release instrumentals is because I don't want to affix meanings onto things with lyrics and words. I want the listener to say what this means to them and interpret it the way they want it, regardless of how anybody interprets it. If you gain pleasure from watching it, listening to it, whatever, it's entertaining. It is good. It's not in the way he wanted it to, but regardless, it is good and it's entertaining. It is, in my view, my favorite dark comedy movie in ever. And I love dark comedy. Europeans love dark comedy massively. It's a major part of British, Irish, German, French humor. You know what I mean? We're always laughing at misfortune and of dark things. It's who we are. Whereas in America it's more circumstantial comedy. In Europe it's dark comedy. You know what I mean? And that's what I see The Room as. How many people in breakups have you heard of whose partner ended up just being a crazy bitch who wanted to hurt them? Exactly. And as Tommy Wiseau said, The Room is that's life. That's what life is. And it's just like I see it for what it is. Obviously, he intended it to be a drama. It's a dark comedy unintentionally. But as I was saying earlier, it's like a foreigner's view, especially a foreigner that came from a particularly censored country. It's like his view on what an idealized American life is. He's a banker. He has a beautiful fiance to be. He has friends that love him and everything. But unintentionally, he portrays that to be an illusion. He doesn't realize it's bullshit, but it is. You know what I mean? You see that obviously he portrays the betrayal well, and I think that that's influenced by his watching of soap operas and probably things like Melrose Place, Beverly Hills 90210, those types of shows, which I hear he is a fan of, and Baywatch and things like that type of thing. But I also think it comes from a place in his life, and he said to Greg Sestero, his co-star, um, like he said, like the Room is a fuck you to Hollywood. It is, but not in the way Tommy was intended it to be. But regardless, it is, as you said, Mr. Electric. It really is a fuck you to Hollywood. Completely. It takes. It's showing you the story of the production and how it all goes, which we'll get into. Shows you exactly how not to produce a film, cost effectively, and keeping the crew happy and everything like that. But what it shows you is how you can set out to do one thing and it can be perceived completely differently. And also, it's a fuck you, I think, from him about like the rules. It's about him saying about the rules, about the way things are done. No, I'm going as completely unconventionally as I can. And regardless of this will still be a success. And in a bizarre twist of events, not a success in the way he pictured, not a critically acclaimed success, but a success nonetheless. So it's this bizarre duality where it's not how he wanted it to turn out to be, but at the same time, it kind of is. It's bittersweet. And we'll get into how like the details of that more. So I'm glad that there's people watching who have a background in it as well. It's not the real truth, but the film represents this emotional reality. It does. It also, as well as rather than just the betrayal, it shows dejection well. It shows distance well. He is very distant from all of the characters completely, and there is no, he's distant from Lisa, his future wife. He's distant from Mark. He's distant from Denny, and Claudette, Lisa's mum. It's a bizarre coldness. You know what I mean? It is very much like he is an alien. You know what I mean? And he doesn't understand his character and him as a person. Writing the script doesn't understand human emotion very well. And he says, as they say, people are very strange these days. So it does show his social struggles well. And as the cast felt, and I feel a lot of the inspiration of this movie is based on his own life in some way. Like Juliette Daniels, who played Lisa, his future wife, who cheats on him in the movie, she says that she thinks that that actually happened to him in his life, and that there was really a Mark, and there was really a Lisa, and that there was really a Denny that he helped out, and all of this, and then it's quite autobiographical. So yeah, but instead of taking his own life in the end, Wiseau, leaves wherever he is and starts a new life, and changes his name and denies his past and all that. So in a way, is killing his old self, So it reveals a lot about him unintentionally, I think, if you really analyze the movie. But the dialogue in the script is fucking ridiculous and unintentionally hilarious, and his delivery of it is unintentionally hilarious. There's no doubt about that. And I said, exactly. So do I, Irish. I find the most inappropriate things funny. And if you want that, The Room is certainly the movie for you. A scene where, like Mark, Greg Sestero's character, he's talking about. He says, "I knew this girl, and she had about a dozen guys. One of them found out about it, beat her up so badly she ended up in a hospital in Guerrero Street." And then Tommy's character Johnny goes, as his character goes, "Ha ha 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 ha! What a story, Mark!" Which is completely an inappropriate reaction or delivery to, Mark telling him about a woman that was, abused by one of her lovers, beaten up by one of her scorned lovers. Tommy just laughs and goes, ah, ha, ha, ha. And Sandy, basically the director of the movie, although Tommy claims he was a director. Not Guerrero Street, yeah, Guerrero Street in San Francisco was where Tommy lived. And funny story, that wasn't in the script, but Greg threw it in as an ad lib, as a joke. And it had to, and Tommy was really pissed off about that because he didn't want where he lived to be like known to people in the movie or anything or the world. And then, but it ultimately he gave in and let it be used in the final cut because it was the only take that they managed to get the audio right in. So it was used. In fact, most of Tommy's dialogue in the movie, which is why another thing that makes it funny, that most of Tommy's dialogue is dubbed, and you'll notice that, Irish and anyone who's listening, if you watch the movie, his audio is like his lips are out of sync with his dialogue. It had to be dubbed because, the amount of times, he would, spontaneously want to do a take or go back to a scene, and the amount of different crews that he pissed off and had to change. They frequently didn't get the sound right or mix it properly, and that resulted in it having to be dubbed in post. Which is really funny, and you'll notice it, which adds to the movie's unintentional comedic value. But yeah, Guerrero Street, where Tommy had his apartment in his home in San Francisco. And there isn't a hospital on Guerrero Street. It was just a funny ad lib. But yeah, back to, before they even started making the movie, it was actually Sestero who got, uh, a proper agent before Tommy. Tommy wasn't, didn't get a proper agent or get into SAG for a very long time. Sestero managed to get one, pretty quickly. And Sestero was able to get representation from the famous agent Iris Burton, who he travelled to LA to meet with, and he got that representation and also managed to get in SAG because he booked a role in a very low budget movie, which is also kind of unintentionally funny, but nowhere near as bad as The Room. Like, so bad it's good type of thing. It is kind of just a shit movie. Called Retro Puppet Master, which was shot in Romania. And this allegedly made Tommy very jealous because here's this young kid who he, was thinking he was going to mentor and he was going to help give the leg up to, is now doing better than him. He's already, gotten representation from an agent in LA while still living in San Francisco. And Tommy has never even done any on-camera work. And Greg's got this movie as well. And this, then Tommy, Wiseau asked Sestero how to get into SAG. And out of all the ways Sestero discussed, the quickest and easiest way for Tommy was to go and star in his own commercial or be the star of a commercial, which he funds himself and does for his store, Street Fashion USA, which was based on the wharf, on Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco Bay, which we discussed earlier, where he sold rip-off Levi's jeans at a marked up price. He says in the commercial, which you can still find on YouTube, he goes, he does a sonnet, one of Shakespeare's sonnets in his distinct Polish accent. He goes, "To be or not to be? That is the question. To be at street fashion." And then he does it whilst dressed like as a jester or whatever, or like an old style thespian theatre person, whatever. So he looks ridiculous, and it is really hilarious. But that gets him into SAG, and that Tommy feels like he's getting his way into the business like Greg has already started doing. So then in the year 2000, 2 years after meeting, Greg and Tommy moved from San Francisco to LA together. And Johnny and Tommy, I get confused with his character's name. Tommy and Greg live in an apartment that Tommy already owns in LA, but never even mentioned. He's like, oh yeah, I already have apartment in LA. I use it for when I go for business meetings and auditions and things. And stuff like that. So like that is like shocking to Greg that Greg doesn't know about the lawsuit because Tommy's very private with where his money comes from and all personal stuff. So like 1,000 things are running through Greg's mind. Like, is Tommy a money launderer? Is he a criminal? Is he a drug dealer? Like, what is he? But then he realized, like, Tommy's such an eccentric kind of loudmouth. He wouldn't make a very good criminal. So, he doesn't pry too much, but he kind of is, confident it isn't too dubious where the money's coming from. Ripped off Levi's is sacrilege. Absolutely. They had like broken zippers and stuff that he'd buy them at a really reduced price, and he'd make a half-assed attempt at like, um, you know, repairing them, and would sell them to naive tourists, thinking they're getting the genuine factory quality thing. And he made a lot of money doing that though, so it wasn't it proved fruitful. And then in 2001, whilst going for auditions after moving most of his time to LA, but still maintaining his properties in San Francisco and his business interests there as well. He was doing mainly auditions along with Greg Sestero in LA, and they were trying to get things happening. And Greg was having a lot better time than Tommy because Greg was 19, had modelled before, so had the kind of Hollywood leading man type looks that they were looking for, whereas Tommy was 43, 44, you know what I mean, and looked like Quasimodo or freaking Frankenstein's monster, you know what I mean. So I wasn't going to be getting the types of roles that Tommy wanted. So Tommy wanted the leading man roles. Tommy wanted to be like romantic lead and all this types of things. And it's part of his like deluded self-belief, which he is charming, but gets unhinged and annoying as the production commences. But in 2001, Wiseau plans to write a play, a theatre play, after watching The Talented Mr. Ripley with Greg Sestero. He faced mass rejections from theatres and producers alike, and quickly decided that he wanted to make it into the plot of The Room into a novel, which he wrote a 540-page copy of, and was taking it to various publishers, and none of them were interested, and literary agents, and none of them were interested, and he didn't have the inclination to self-publish it, but then he decided, right, I don't want to make it into play, I don't want to make it into book, I want to make my own movie because I'm not getting cast in movies that I want to be cast in. I'm not getting auditions. I'm not getting anything. I need to make it happen for myself. You know what I mean? Which has been, the story of all of his life. Everything that's happened, he's kind of made happen through his own kind of will and determination and positive thinking. So he believed he could just will it into existence. So finally, Wiseau decides to write the story of The Room into a screenplay, which he dedicates late 2001 and early 2002 to, and then he is 100% independently funding the project and the distribution of it, and it costs him a total of $6 million of his own money. And he still had plenty left over after that. So Tommy Wiseau is a very wealthy man. Principal photography began in LA in June 2002. So like he wrote the screenplay. It only took him a handful of months from writing the screenplay to actually starting principal photography. Production lasted a whopping 4 months, which is crazy for such a kind of a low budget production like The Room was. And Tommy, and I'll explain to you, like, we'll get into why it was such a highly budget. Yeah, crazy, I know. 6 million of his own money. Yeah, no studio, no nothing backing him. Tommy bought all of the camera and lighting equipment from Burns and Sawyer Film Equipment Company in LA, which is very unusual. Because usually you rent camera and lighting equipment because the cost of it is so prohibitively expensive, as well as the fact that the technology in lighting, audio visual cameras is evolving so rapidly that within a few months what you buy will be obsolete anyway and will decrease rapidly in value. So everybody who's making movies, even Titanic, the equipment on that was rented. It wasn't bought, and that was like a fucking $1 billion movie. You know what I mean? It was Fox and you know Paramount had to go in together, club together for that movie's budget. But Tommy Wiseau, just funded off his own back, bought all the equipment, and he said he wanted to do that for as an investment for future projects, which was, I think, the first time in his life he made a really bad financial decision. Everything before then was pretty sound financially, obviously because he'd become so wealthy, from nothing. Of course, the settlement from the lawsuit helped, but he invested it so well, other than the room, which you could argue in time was a pretty fruitful investment. He invested so well that this is the first error I think that he's made visibly. But as a result of him, giving Burns and Sawyer so much money, they kind of felt, okay, we'll allow you at discount to shoot the movie in full at the little production studio that we have here on site at our store, and also with their connections and obviously knowing loads of people who work on crews because they all go there to rent their equipment, they were able to get people who owed them favors to come in and work on the movie at a lower rate than they usually would. And despite that favor from them, Tommy regularly pissed off and alienated the crew and the DPs so often that they would walk off set. I think they had about 3 different crews by the time the 4 months of production wrapped. So yeah, despite that, Tommy was still very difficult to them. And also, it's been theorized by Greg Sestero and me that Burns and Sawyer were so desperate to see that the production happened, so that Tommy didn't return the camera equipment because they'd made so much money on him, possibly into the millions around there from the amount of stuff that he bought, and we'll get into why. That's where most of the budget went, on the equipment, not the salary of the actors, other than Greg Sestero, who we'll get into that. Basically, they were like, we want to make sure that this happens so that he doesn't return it, so that we can keep the near enough $1 million that he's pumping into us that will really change our lives. You know what I mean? So that's why they contended with that much, and I think that Tommy kind of suspected that, so was very much eager to push boundaries and see how much they would take. But it took a lot longer than a month to do. It took 4, so beyond the point of no return for him. But it wasn't about money, you know what I mean? It was about him doing what he wanted, but also playing games with people, like I think he heard Alfred Hitchcock used to do, and various other directors like Stanley Kubrick. So I think Tommy Wiseau saw himself in the league of those types of guys, eccentric, misunderstood, creative geniuses. You know what I mean? Who are very, very eccentric. But obviously, I would put him in the category of an eccentric genius. But I think he's I wouldn't say he's a genius. He's an eccentric, unintentional genius. He doesn't mean to be a genius, but he's unintentionally a genius. In a sense, though, he is somewhat of a genius. So yeah, like that, near enough $1 million on the equipment alone, which is insane. And also to double the cost of the equipment and of the crew and everything, and the time it took to film. Production lasted twice as long as needed due to Wiseau insisting they filmed in both 35mm film and HD video, which also meant that they had to pay a crew double the size that was necessary and take double the time as needed. So if he didn't shoot in both 35mm and HD, which was an exercise in futility, it pick one or the other. You know what I mean? He was just, making it more complicated because he said it will be first movie shot in both simultaneously. You know what I mean? Which just created even more difficulties in the production, dragged it on even longer, and cost him even more money in terms of the equipment, the crew, everything. And it made it a lot more tense and difficult than it would have been like otherwise. And yeah, um, the movie basically, yeah, uh, Tommy. Oh yeah. Yeah, despite writing the sorry, I was just trying to find my notes. Despite writing the whole script himself, Tommy would regularly forget his own lines and would flub them as well. Yet he would get hysterical at other actors for even slight mistakes. Greg Sestero was originally not meant to play Mark. It was originally a man named Don who was cast to play Mark. Tommy wrote the part for Mark for Greg, though. Despite this, Greg knew how bad the movie was and how bad the script was, but didn't have the heart to tell Tommy, and felt that doing the movie would destroy his career. Greg changed his mind, however, and Don was fired when Tommy offered Greg a life-changing amount of money and a new car, provided he see through the production till its very end. So he got Greg in, roped him in using that, and that was his method of kind of control. So Greg was also already living in Tommy's apartment with him at this point and not paying rent. But Greg moved out eventually during production, and this kind of led their relationship to be a little strained, and it was very strained toward the end of production. But it improved and repaired over time. They've grown to have a mutual understanding of each other over years of understanding and being in close quarters with each other. I think Greg knows him better than anybody does, which still isn't amazingly well, as well as anyone can. And ultimately, as I said, production was difficult. They went through several different crews, several different DPs. Several people were replaced, like Don, and the character of Lisa was replaced. Her friend in the final movie, Michelle, actually was the woman who was initially cast to play Lisa. And Tommy would actually have backup actors for near enough most of the cast in case he decided he didn't want to have them or they couldn't be there for whatever. And actually, one of the cast had to be replaced during filming. Peter, who played Tommy's psychiatrist friend in the movie, was replaced in the penultimate party scene where Tommy finally confronts Mark, his best friend, played by Greg, for cheating with Lisa, his soon-to-be wife, fiance, behind his back, and they get in a fight. And the guy who played Peter, the psychiatrist, was unable to be in that scene because he had to leave the production because he'd already told Tommy before the start that he was booked to do another gig, and it held priority over the room. And he said this from the get-go, but Tommy assured him that production would have wrapped before that role would have started, but it didn't. It dragged on for 4 months. So the guy who played Peter just mysteriously disappears in the middle of the film, and then in the last scene is replaced by a totally different guy by a different name, and he's basically filling in for Peter. So yeah, this is how crazy and disjointed this movie is. It really is crazy, and we'll get to the plot, quote unquote, toward the end. And so yeah, the finally, at the end of production, like there are various other things that happen during the production of it that are outlandishly crazy. Tommy insisted that he had his own private bathroom created for himself at the camera equipment store's small studio, even though they had very nice bathroom facilities there that Tommy could have used. He insisted he have his own made with his own plumbing attached, which he paid for, and they did. And instead of having a door on it, he had just a curtain as a partition. And this was situated right close to where they were filming most of the movie. So whenever Tommy wanted to go to the restroom, the entire crew had to basically be, the only thing separating him from the entire cast and crew was a small like blanket as a partition, you know. So that shows his level of, you know, bizarre, you know, eccentricities and kind of diva kind of star nature, and he'd regularly have blowouts with the DP and with other crew members for them mocking him for his like prima donna behavior and his unreasonableness with them. Like for example, one day it was really hot when they were filming, because they were filming it in the summer of 2002 originally. You know, it started in May. Most of it was filmed in the summer of, you know, June, July, August, and wrapped in September. And but yeah, so it was filmed during like in LA in the summer, you know, so really bad heat. So Tommy wouldn't allow air conditioning in you know, the studios where they were making it, and the elderly woman who was playing Lisa's mother, she fainted during production, and she had to, you know, be rushed to hospital by Greg Sestero, who was playing Mark, you know. So all kinds of craziness happened on the production, and Tommy was kind of, it was a very hostile environment and a very tense environment. And, you know, despite that, people still persevered and tried their best to make it a decent time. Like Juliet Daniels, who played Lisa, despite all the difficulties on set, you know, after work every day would sing karaoke at a nearby bar with some of the cast and crew and get drunk. So they were trying to persevere through it all, and Tommy was getting increasingly stressed and erratic and was unable to do a lot of his scenes and had to do 30, 40, 50 takes on seemingly simple scenes of simple dialogue that he himself wrote. So he was taking this frustration out on the crew and the other cast, and it was up to Greg Sestero to basically be the line manager, almost like an assistant producer or DP himself, to just kind of bring peace between Tommy and everybody else. You know what I mean? He was like the go-between, the neutral guy that was liked by both sides, by both Tommy and everybody else. So it was Greg who was, you know, really putting in the work to make the movie kind of still, you know, go. You know, so it really is crazy. But, you know, despite that, you know, it wrapped, you know, 4 months, you know, after production started, and then it premiered a year after primary principal photography began. It premiered in June the 27th, June the 27th, 2003, a year after principal photography began at Lamille Fairfax Theatre and also Fallbrook Theatres in LA. And apparently during the oh my god, yeah, absolutely. They are there somewhere. Like there's like a parallel like making of documentary that Tommy hired a young Mexican boy to produce. He was like, I say boy, he was like 19, 20. A young Mexican man to produce like the making of documentary. But as a part of that, he made the kid record everything secretly. Like when the cast of the crew was bad mouthing him, Tommy knew about it, and it was it was included in this. And then Tommy would like confront the cast members and say, "You bad mouth me. You say I look like Dracula. You say I look like monster. You say I can't act. Well, I don't think you do your job very well. What you think of that, huh?" So like it was just this craziness. So it was just like. It was just that, you know, so like the making of documentary is near enough just as amusing as the actual movie itself. You know what I mean? So yeah, I want to find outtakes because it must be just like fucking amazingly hilarious, like you said, Irish. And if I find them, I will certainly repost them or link them in my community tab. I know the live viewers for this isn't very great, but I think it will be one of those that the rewatches it will be very big because I put the room in the tag, and there's a massive fan base for the room as we'll get into toward the end. But yeah, premiered in those theatres, and it had an initial run of 2 weeks in several theatres across LA and San Francisco, and this was done. This was all paid for by Tommy. He paid for all of the distribution, all of it to be filmed, all of it to be filmed and produced, all the cast and everything, and the crew, and also for the distribution. So putting it into theaters as well. He tried to offer it to Paramount, but they declined it within 24 hours, which is bizarre, because usually it takes about 72 hours for them to respond. But it was so bad, they found it, that they were confident within only 24 hours that they really weren't interested. Yeah, I shared it. Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Just Irish. It's really kind of you to do. I really appreciate that. I appreciate all of you really who helped the channel, who are here chatting, who, you know, everything. It's just very much a channel, you know, for the viewers, you know what I mean, and for everybody, you know what I mean, and made by you all, you know what I mean. I'm just the front man of the band. You're all the songwriters, you know what I mean. That's what I think anyway. But yeah. It was around for 2 weeks in a few theaters, which Tommy paid for it to be in. The 2 week period was basically because 2 weeks is the minimum a movie must be in theaters for it to be nominated for an Academy Award. And Tommy, despite the reaction at the premiere, which I'll get into, believed that The Room could have gotten an Academy Award. You know, he was still that delusional that he thought it could get an Oscar or an Academy Award or something. So that's why he paid to keep it in for 2 weeks, as long as he possibly could. And the reaction at the premiere was laughter instantly, but a lot of people walked out of it early, including members of the cast and crew, which made Tommy quite depressed and angry. And then at this moment, Greg suggested to Tommy, look, you know, you can't always control how people react to stuff, but the fact is people did laugh and did enjoy it on a certain level. So maybe try to market it as a dark comedy instead of a serious, you know, Tennessee Williams style drama. And then from that moment, Tommy made a new trailer for it, where it was a new, you know, promotional material for it, saying it was dark comedy, and that and the reviews that it did get were terrible, apart from one that may have been written by Tommy himself, where it says, Tommy Wiseau, the raging Cajun, unleashes laughs and dramatic dark comedy in this new amazing movie, The Room. The raging Cajun, because he was still trying to say at that point, I'm from New Orleans. I'm Cajun. It's like, you know, in Coneheads where they go, we come from France. It's basically the real life equivalent of that. If they ever make another Coneheads, they should fucking put him in it. Jesus Christ, he'd be perfect in that. That's a movie that's a casting he'd actually be good in. You know what I mean? His bizarreness would make sense in that. You know what I mean? Whereas in The Room, it made no sense. You know what I mean? If he played an alien. And the movie made only $1,800 in its initial 2 week run of its $6 million budget. And after it after the initial run failed, was so reevaluated how he was going to market the movie because of Greg Sestero. He said, right, all the promotional material was now, this is dark comedy, this is genius, I always intended it to be this way, it's great trick I pulled on moviegoer and Hollywood, I'm really clever artist. So he started that whole fucking thing. And now he maintains it to this day, which is hilarious. Uh, but does he wrestle gators? He fights big sharks. He made a movie after The Room called Big Shark, where a big shark comes and invades New Orleans, and Tommy has to fight it and save the day. So he wrestles big sharks, not gators. Probably would say he has wrestled gators. So yeah. Hi, Megan L. Glad you could make it. Yeah, we're talking about the greatest worst movie of all time, The Room. Unless you've heard of it, you might not have. It's a trip. In if you want a kind of a background on who it is who made it, Tommy Wiseau. You go to the start. We give a big background on it all, and I'll be linking the movie in full for free, which you can go and check it out after the live on the Internet Archives. And it is the greatest worst movie ever, Megan. It's a movie that was written, directed, produced, and entirely self-financed by the same guy, the star of it as well, Tommy Wiseau, who came from Poland, went to France, and then finally came to America. And through a car crash, lawsuit, and him running his own clothing store and loads of other hustling, he managed to get loads and loads of money together and fund his own project, which he wanted to be a serious American drama, like a Tennessee Williams play, but a movie. But because of his poor writing and lack of real knowledge on how to structure a screenplay or what makes a movie good, it instead of being a dark thriller or drama, it became an unintentional dark comedy. And it's a cult classic. It's the classic it's so bad it's good movie. And the way he delivers his lines, like the opening line of the movie is, hi babe, I have something for you, where he hands his flowers to his future wife because he refuses to call her his fiance. It's so weird and eccentric and quirky, but you just can't, and bad, and poorly plotted and poorly written, but you can't just help and sit and go, oh my God, there's something, this is so bad that it's entertaining. And if it's entertaining, is it really that bad? You know what I mean? It's such a duality of a movie. You know what I mean? It's the most bizarre movie ever. And I said earlier, I've watched The Room more than any other movie ever made. You know what I mean? I don't just watch quote unquote shitty movies. I love Scorsese movies. I love De Palma movies. I love Tarantino movies. I love oh god, what's Coppola movies, like the Dons, the best movie makers. I'm major fans of their movies, but I've watched The Room more times than any of their movies. Because there's something about it that is just so. Are you not entertained? Exactly. Of course. That's the question. You know what I mean? It's so uh, good reference. Good reference. I love your references. Yeah. And my laugh then was kind of like Tommy's laugh. He goes, ha 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 ha. That's how he laughs in the movie, and that's so many quirks of it that just make it just it's wacky and bizarre and unexpected. And like, if you're ever depressed, just watch it, and it will just bring you up. You'll just be so distracted from any of your worldly problems, and just be hyper focused on this thing that's a movie that it isn't like any other movie ever made ever, and no movie will ever be like it ever. Because many people have tried to make movies like The Room, but nobody can, because Tommy never tried for it, or never wanted it, or never intended it to turn out this way. This was by accident. This was by osmosis. This was by a miracle. You know what I mean? This is, you know, it's crazy. You know what I mean? It's so fucking crazy. And maybe like when I start my Rumble channel, because it's less bitchy about copyright, I could do like a live, you know, reaction to the room, where I watch it with you guys, and you can watch it as well with me, and we can all watch it together and just share in the experience. It's not like watching any movie, it's an experience that you will remember for the rest of your life, and you will instantly want to tell other people about and bring them in on. It's like a cult in a weird way. It really is. That's why it's called a cult movie, because it's like a cult. You watch it and you just want to bring other people into it. It's insane. I can't compare it to anything else. And yeah, like I said, he originally wanted it to be drama. You know, people in the, you know, the early screenings, the premieres, its initial run reacted to it by laughing at it and seeing it as farcical. So then Tommy was like, I remarket it as dark comedy. You know what I mean? And then he, after, you know, failing in its initial run, only making $1,800 in 2 weeks, he then, you know, remarketed it and then paid for a $5,000 a month. So he's splashing the cash again. He doesn't spare an expense when it comes to his art. $5,000 a month billboard, in a really prime location in Hollywood called Highland Avenue. And Valerie Knox, when you're watching this on replay, if you're not listening now, you know, please comment if you remember seeing this billboard in Highland Avenue, because it was around for like years after the room's like initial run in 2003. It was up until like 2009, I think. He kept it up that long. So Val Knox, if you're watching, and anyone else of my LA viewers, please comment if you've seen the billboard, because I'd love to know like what it looked like and like what your reactions to it were if you ever saw it, looked at it. Yeah, like Rocky Horror, just like Rocky Horror. And Tommy Wiseau is actually says he's a big fan of Rocky Horror as well. And hey, Jay, didn't get the notification. I'm listening as I hop into the shower bath, so I can clean the darn dreads. Lol. Listening, I'll chat when I can. Will you be on a bit more, Hon? And yeah, thanks, Sharon. And thanks for making it to chat. Shares like my best wishes to you and Mark, and shares like almost like my YouTube mother. You know what I mean? She's really like been like a mentor to me about YouTube as well. You know, and she's really like helped me a lot with it and how to navigate it and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, she's a big friend to the channel and great mod, and one of the people who helped, you know, encourage me, along with Val and a few other people, help encourage me to keep doing this and to do it. So thanks, Sharon. I hope you wash out your dreads. Well, yeah, because Cher has dreads and they're very impressive. She's got a really cool style, and she's really cool YouTube channel as well, where she talks true crime cases and loads of other things as well. And unlike a lot of other people in true crime, she isn't a spectator. She actively gets involved in cases, trying to improve them. So like I usually do true crime stuff. So, you know, if you're interested in that, as well as, you know, The Room and all that other stuff, definitely check out Jay. Mark and I absolutely adore you. Oh, that's really appreciative. Send, you know, my best wishes to Mark and the girls as well. You know, I like love to you and your family. You're very much like second parents to me, surrogate parents to me. You know what I mean? And I want to really catch up with you both, all of you, very soon, and hopefully collab on something very soon as well. You know, new cases, conspiracy theories, whatever, anything really. You know, I'd love to go on a deep dive with you all, because your takes are always great, and I love how you are so unfiltered. You know what I mean? You just say how you feel it, and I really value that. I have no time for fake people or people who try to sugarcoat shit. So yeah, everybody watching on the replay or in live, certainly check out Voices Behind the Wall, True Crime on YouTube. Share, friend of the channel, does a great job. Great, glad to hear, Sure. Enjoy your shower stroke bath, and I hope the dreads come out well. And so yeah, like he paid for this billboard 5 grand a month to put it up, and and it was up for 5-6 years after the movie initially premiered, and this was actually up to promote. Like after its initial 2 week run and had failed, Tommy still paid to have the movie shown on Fridays at midnight screening, so he could like pay theaters to show it at midnight on Fridays. You know, on occasional theaters, on like sporadic theaters throughout LA, San Francisco, and this slowly developed an underground following for it, because initially film students started going to the screenings at midnight to check it out, and then just like fell in love with how like quirky, bizarre, outlandish and unintentionally funny the movie is, and how it's almost like a blueprint of how not to conventionally make a movie in Hollywood. So they were all just like really interested in it, and this is like the mid 2000s. So like he'd been doing this, like continuing it being screened uh ever since its initial release. It's never not been screened for a really extended period of time, in some way or another. So he kept paying these places out of his own pocket to screen it, and like on Fridays at midnight, and then he would appear at these screenings himself, and do Q&A sessions, do signings, sell products of his, like his jeans, his leather jackets, underwear that he made and sold as well. He's a peddler, you know what I mean? He's a businessman, and he would do that at these places as well. And like I said, in the mid 2000s, early to mid 2000s, around 2004, 2005, six, after a few years of this, it started getting that following from the film student crowd. And then obviously the internet, it is in its early days, getting bigger and bigger. Social media, forums and stuff, like it exploded on the internet, and people were talking about it, and that explosion brought it to an international audience. So instead of just having the screenings, which by this point had become total sellouts, every seat in the house was being filled, massive following, people going week after week to keep watching this movie that is considered so bad but so good at the same time, so unintentionally entertaining. You know what I mean? It was selling out week after week after week, and then Tommy started moving these screenings international. So in Britain, Australia, Israel, Japan, India, South America, basically every continent in the world, the room has been screened in. And based on these screenings that he's done after the film, he's made about $5 million back from the 6 million budget. So it hasn't been that big of a loss. And then you think about all the projects that he's been in after The Room, as well as the merchandise that it's helped him sell. He's actually made money from it, but it's taken him about 10, 15, 20 years to actually turn the profit. He has eventually turned the profit. And he does like massive Q&As, like loads of the ex-cast turn up and do signings and everything. It's a massive thing, and it exploded in popularity on the internet. The first time I heard of it was because of the internet, because of the Nostalgia Critic, who is like a popular YouTube, like it's a character played by a guy called Doug Walker, who plays like an over like zealous, like kind of snobby and like over animated film critic, like an accentuated parody of Walker's real self. And he reviewed The Room in about 2010, and I watched the video. I was a massive fan of Doug Walker's back in the early days of YouTube, and like that's how I got into The Room. And it's the same with a lot of other people. Doug Walker's Room review, I think, is his most viewed video he's ever done. And that got me interested in The Room, and I looked into it, and I showed all my friends it, and we all laughed at it, and we all would quote the lines to each other. And then I went to the next stage and went to an actual screening of it in London, and it's the at the Prince's Theatre in London, which is everyone in the Room fan community suggests is like the best uh, place to go for a screening for it, and like the fans are so intense. Like, funny thing about the room is like there's loads of like stock pictures and in picture frames of spoons for like because Tommy thought it would be funny to have that in the movie, or interesting or different. And like as a result of that, the fans have embraced it. So at these screenings, everybody throws plastic spoons in the air to celebrate whenever the spoon pictures are on the screen. So like the fan, everybody quotes the lines out loud. It's like a concert. It's like a carnival. You know what I mean? It's such like a party atmosphere going to one of these screenings, and you can connect with all these kind of like-minded people who've had this shared experience of this whole weird and wonderful journey that is the room. And like some of the friendships I've made in the room fan community, have been some of my longest lasting friendships in all of my life. I got into the room when I was like a teenager, and I'm still into it now, approaching 30. So like, doesn't that just show you the legacy, the legs that this movie has? And it's just crazy, it really, really is. And yeah, and as I was saying, um, yeah, screenings still happen to this day. So if you want to look online, you can probably find somewhere relatively near you that will be screening it. If you want to see it in with other people who are like minded to it. But I suggest, like, first time you watch it with another person who hasn't seen it, because watching it alone, you kind of want someone there to be like, are you seeing this? Are you seeing how like crazy and bizarre this whole plot storyline and all the delivery of the lines is? You know what I mean? Like, are you seeing what I'm seeing, or am I going completely mad? Like, you kind of want that. So, like, that's how I recommend you watch The Room. And also, like, as I was mentioning earlier, Greg Sestero, who played Mark, the character that was Tommy Wiseau's character, Johnny's best friend, who betrays him by cheating on Lisa, cheating on no, by cheating with Lisa, Tommy's future wife, behind his back. Greg Sestero, he writes a book based on the entire production and meeting and knowing Johnny, called The Disaster Artist. And this is, like, as I said earlier, is released into a book and an audio book. And then James Franco buys the rights to this and then makes it into the movie The Disaster Artist. And The Disaster Artist with James Franco and Seth Rogen and what's his name, Dave Franco and Alison Brie, and various other members of the cast. That is directly based on the making of. It's a movie that's based on the making of the movie The Room, and Franco plays Tommy Wiseau, and I really enjoy that movie. And I know Franco is, quite a controversial figure for some of his past actions, but I separate the art from the artist, and I think that his portrayal of Wiseau in the movie The Disaster Artist was a very good portrayal, and I really like that movie very much. I think it's amazing to like see like the dynamics behind the scenes, and how crazy it all was, and how everyone like on the cast and on the crew was equally as shocked and freaked out by how outlandish the whole thing was, but just kind of resigned themselves to the fact that Tommy was the one paying the check, so they kind of had to do what he said, regardless of how insane things were getting. So it's really interesting. And also, there's been the Room Returns as well, which was recently released, which was basically Bob Odenkirk and others doing a shot for shot, scene for scene remake of The Room, and donating the proceeds of it to charity, which I think is really good. And this is another thing about The Room, like, James Franco read the book The Disaster Artist and bought the rights to make a movie into it. So that's one celebrity fan. Seth Rogen was already a celebrity fan of it. Paul Rudd, Judd Apatow, like Jonah Hill, all the people in the kind of like the Judd Apatow movie world. So like all the guys who were in like Knocked Up, 40-Year-Old Virgin, This Is the End, those types of movies, like Evan Goldberg's Superbad, those types of movies all those actors like discovered it around that time and love it. So a lot of those guys like cameo in the movie The Disaster Artist, because obviously they know Franco, but also because they're fans of The Room and they want to be part of, this thing where they, obviously Bob Odenkirk is a massive fan of it as well, so, and did that shoot for shoot remake of it, and also it's not the only production that Tommy Wiseau and Greg Sestero have done together. In 2017, and Greg Sestero and Tommy Wiseau starred in another movie together called Best Friends Volumes 1 and 2, which is a movie that was written by Greg instead of Tommy this time. And it's about basically Greg is homeless and down on his luck, and Tommy's character is a mortician and steals basically people's golden teeth and sells it. And then the character, who Greg Sestero plays, finds a woman, and that woman's a gold digger and betrays him, and tricks him into betraying Tommy Wiseau's character. So it is a movie like The Room. It's about betrayal and greed and lust and all that, and power and all that kind of stuff. But unlike The Room, it's not written horrifically and it's not delivered horrifically. Tommy Wiseau's character in that movie makes sense. He is an eccentric and he delivers his lines eccentric, and that isn't bizarre for his character and it isn't bizarre for the plot of the movie, unlike in The Room, and the script is pretty decently done. You know what I mean? But despite that, I've only seen that film, the two volumes of it, a few times. I've never rewatched it, and I never got the same amount of entertainment out of it as I did The Room. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good film, but I thought The Room was was a really bad film, and so bad that it becomes so entertaining to watch it that it ceases to even be bad. It becomes good, which is such a paradox. And it shows you how good and bad are such subjective terms, you know what I mean? That if you can get entertainment out of something, it is good, whether the person intended it to or not. There is a goodness in it. You know what I mean? And it's crazy. You know what I mean? It's inspired this so many movies based on it. So many famous people love it, and it's got such a legacy. And as to go through, to end this, to kind of discuss the plot of the movie in summary, which I know I haven't in full, but I guess it isn't really that important because it's so fucking mental and disjointed. Basically, Tommy Wiseau's, stars in it, writes it. He stars as Johnny, the all-American guy who is banker, who is a bank. I won't do it in his complete accent because it gets quite tiring and kind of annoying, I think. But yeah, he plays a banker in the movie who wants to get a promotion but doesn't get it, and is living with his fiance or future wife, as he calls it, called Lisa, played by Juliette Daniels. And Lisa, despite having sex with Johnny, in one scene, and the sex scenes in the movie are very comedic because it looks like he's having sex with her belly button, and they're so badly choreographed and shot and look so unnatural that there's nothing even slightly sexual about it. It's just comedic. It's just hilarious about how it's like I said about it's like an alien who made the movie. It's like he'd never even had sex before. He didn't know how to. It's bizarre like that. You know what I mean? Which probably wasn't true, but I mean I don't know. It's just like one of the, and that's within the first 10 minutes of the fucking thing. There's a bunch of sex scenes, and then after those sex scenes finish, the character of Lisa's like, I don't love him anymore, and then she just starts cheating on him with his best friend Mark, and then the film ends with Tommy Wiseau's character Johnny discovering this, fighting with Mark, telling Lisa to get out of his life, and then shooting himself, but seemingly surviving after shooting himself in the head and wailing on the floor, which is comedic as well, which adds to the farcical nature of it, the unintended comedy. And there's a bunch of subplots in the film that make zero sense whatsoever. There's a subplot about this kid, this 19-year-old who Tommy Wiseau's character funds to go to college, and then but also at the same time is creepily perverted and watches and wants to watch Tommy Wiseau's character Johnny and Lisa have sex, and constantly tries to have sex with Lisa, and like Tommy's seemingly completely fine with it, which is bizarre. He goes, "It's okay to love someone deep inside your heart. There's nothing wrong with that. If more people love each other, then the world would be a better place to live." So yeah, I gotta finish by doing like the most famous quotes of the movie, and that's one of them. And I know I did a few others. The most famous one though is when, you know, Lisa starts cheating with Mark, and then like Lisa, you know, because for whatever reason she's a bad character, decides to you know, lie and say that Johnny got drunk and hit her. This is the most famous scene. Johnny walks out onto the roof, which is green screened behind to look like San Francisco, and then goes to Greg Sestero's character Mark, who is having the affair with Lisa. He goes, "I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark." So it's just this like really bizarre delivery, and then he goes, "Oh, hi, Mark." You know what I mean? And then that's the biggest, like, most famous line of the movie, and that just always cracks me up and cracks viewers up alike. And it's supposed to be like one of the most serious parts of the movie. You know what I mean? Where he's like, why is she accusing me of this? I never hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit." It's just so fucking ridiculous how he delivered the lines. And you know, there's another part of it where, like, even in serious moments, like in the penultimate scene where he fights Mark over, you know, confronting him about, you know, having the affair with his fiance behind his back, he goes, "You're just a little chicken, cheep, 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 cheep." You know, and he says this throughout the film at various points, but like he says it at like the most dramatic moment of the movie, and it just causes hilarity, unintentional hilarity, that he's doing something so ridiculous at what's supposed to be the most serious penultimate scene, you know, and it's just so fucking funny. I can't stress enough. And the subplots, like Denny, this kid who's like perverted and trying to low key get a threesome with Johnny and Lisa. Uh, Basically, in one scene, it like owes this guy called Chris R, who only has one scene in the movie, money for drugs, and this is never mentioned before. And then this guy Chris R, who actually delivers the only convincing performance in the entire movie, portrays a drug dealer looking for his money very well, and holds a gun to Denny's head and goes, "Where's my money, Denny? Where's my fucking money, Denny? You ain't got 5 fucking minutes, Denny." And apparently the guy who played Chris R, Dan Janjigian, was like first ever acting role, and has like studied up on it and committed to everything really hard, his character, and just like in between takes was just yelling curse words like "fuck, fuck, fuck" to just amp himself up and get him to like a really like amped up angry type of frame of mind to be the character. So like when he delivered the performance, the guy who played Denny was actually shitting himself, thinking that Dan Janjigian playing Chris R, the drug dealer, was actually going to hit him, because he was the only actor in the fucking movie that actually cared enough to give a really strong performance, because it was the only thing he'd ever done. And yeah, that scene, it's funny because of how intense and good Dan Janjigian is compared to like anywhere else in the movie. But also it's funny because it's like it serves the plot in no way, and it just comes out of nowhere at random. And then Tommy and Mark come running out of nowhere onto the roof, tackle Chris R, disarm him, and then he goes away. And then Claudette, Lisa's mother, and then Lisa run up to join them. And then Lisa goes, what drugs are you taking, Danny? What's going on here? What's going on here? What drugs do you take? What drugs do you do?" And she just keeps repeating that line of dialogue like frantically, and it's just so funny. And then Lisa's mother says to Denny, she goes, that is not nothing, young man. Somebody better take charge around here. And then Denny goes to Lisa's mother, you're not my fucking mother. And that's like one of the funny iconic lines of the movie. And it always cracks me up. It's just so funny. And yeah, that's like, and then there's another pointless plot line where Claudette, Lisa's mother, has breast cancer, and it's only mentioned once, and it's never resolved or mentioned again. And she delivers the line like, just, I got the results of the test back. I definitely have breast cancer. Oh, I'm old and I'm dying. And like Tommy Wiseau insisted that the actress playing Claudette deliver the line with like completely like no kind of feeling whatsoever. And she just responded to the will of the director. Same with the rest of the cast, apart from Jan Jigian, who really gave it his all, regardless of what Tommy wanted, and clashed with Tommy as well over pay. And but yeah, she just delivered it with that lackluster. Oh, and I'm dying, and it's just one of those famous lines. And another quirky part of the movie where it's just so like, why are they delivering the lines this way? Why is Tommy making them do it this way? Why does he think this is like how it should be done? Is he an alien? You know what I mean? And it's just so funny. But yeah, thank you everybody for sticking with me for this kind of different style of live tonight. You know what I mean? Or today, or whatever time it is when you're listening to this live or on the replay. Bit of a break from the true crime. You know what I mean? Every now and then I'll dive into topics that I find interesting that aren't true crime or conspiracy related, because I saw that my stream on the adult entertainment industry, I enjoyed doing it and enjoyed raising awareness about those issues, and it did very well, and a lot of people enjoyed it. So I'll keep occasionally delving into differing topics to kind of diversify my audience and diversify the type of content I make, because I'm interested in a lot more stuff other than just true crime, music, and conspiracy theories. I have a varied interests, and I want my channel to reflect that. So stay tuned for more multitudes of different content. And thanks for sticking with us. And I'll post a link to watch the full movie of The Room on my community page, and let me know in the comments what you think about the movie if you check it out, or any questions about the movie, or your reaction to all this. Or like I said earlier, Val or any of my LA people, did you ever see the billboard that was promoting it, or did you ever go to a screening, or any stories related to The Room, or any screenings of The Room, or anything? Please feel free to comment. I want to hear from all of you. And big love to the Room community and all you crazy bastards who keep this movie alive. You're a great bunch of fans. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you very much.